Lucas Grant lingered in the dim light of his apartment, one hand resting on the doorframe of his daughter's bedroom, the other gripping his phone like it was a lifeline. Sophie's breathing had finally evened out, soft and steady under the warm duvet she clutched around her small shoulders. It had been a long, grinding day, 2 late-night maintenance calls, a flooded office bathroom, a misbehaving HVAC unit that refused to cooperate, and a series of meetings that reminded him again why he worked in facilities instead of finance or IT. Yet, as exhausting as the day had been, nothing compared to the weight settling in his chest as he stared at his phone screen. He typed quickly, fingers fumbling over the keys. "I miss you." The words felt natural, necessary, a comfort he could share with someone who understood the loneliness he carried after the long divorce and the ceaseless responsibility of raising Sophie alone. He had meant the message for Marcus, his old college friend, the only person who knew what it was like to juggle ambition and exhaustion, heartbreak and hope. With a simple tap, he hit send and exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. And then the pit opened in his stomach. The notification didn't read Marcus. It read, Victoria Hale, CEO of Whitmore Industries. The name alone made his blood run cold. His finger hovered over the screen, unwilling to touch it, unwilling to make it worse by double-tapping for confirmation. But there it was, small, blinking letters on the screen that would haunt him for weeks, sent to Victoria Hale. 3 seconds passed. 6. 10. Lucas's heart pounded so loudly he was sure Sophie would wake, sure the walls of the apartment would shatter under the beat. He imagined Victoria's eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanning the words meant for a friend, meant for comfort, meant to be private. "I miss you." What would she think? That he was reckless, unprofessional, intrusive? That he had crossed some invisible, sacred boundary between employee and executive? He sank onto the edge of the couch, pressing his face into his hands. The apartment felt too small, too quiet, as if the walls themselves were whispering rumors. His gaze flicked to the framed photo of Sophie on the side table, her 6-year-old smile frozen in time. She was asleep now, unaware of the panic her father had wrought upon himself in mere seconds. He should have been thinking about her, protecting her from the worries of the adult world, but instead he was paralyzed by a single misdirected text. Lucas's thoughts spiraled. What if she forwarded it to HR? What if she interpreted it as some sort of inappropriate advance? He had built a life of careful boundaries, of meticulous attention to every task and every protocol, and now a single thumbstroke had undone years of professional restraint. The fear twisted in his gut like a coil of steel. Every scenario played out in his mind, Victoria frowning behind her immaculate desk, calling security, an email terminating him, whispers in the hallways of Whitmore Tower. The thought of Sophie coming home to an empty apartment and a father who had lost everything sent a new wave of panic through him. And yet, alongside the fear, there was guilt. How could he be so careless? So human in a world that demanded perfection from everyone, particularly from the people who worked in a building like Whitmore Tower. Sophie had come to him tonight with stories about her day, her little hand turkey craft, her observations of clouds and dinosaurs, and he had nodded and smiled and laughed, trying to be present, trying to be enough for her. And now, he was failing before the person whose power could strip him of everything, all because of a simple, honest text. Lucas pressed the phone to his chest, imagining the rhythm of Victoria's heartbeat matching his own imagined fury, her composure cutting through the words he had sent. He wanted to undo it. He wanted to scream, to apologize, to pull back the universe and write the text to the right person. But the screen remained the same, blinking mercilessly, a reminder of the mistake that had just begun to unravel everything. Somewhere in the quiet apartment, Sophie shifted in her sleep. Lucas traced the curve of her hairline with trembling fingers, letting the weight of responsibility anchor him just enough to keep from falling apart entirely. Whatever happens now, he whispered to himself, I'll fix it. Somehow. And yet, deep down, he knew he was powerless. The misfire had been sent. There was no taking it back. And Lucas Grant, single father, exhausted man, human in all the wrong ways, was left waiting in the dark, the silence of the night pressing down around him like the first cold fingers of winter. The morning air hit Lucas like a cold slap as he slid into the driver's seat of his 10-year-old Honda, the engine coughing to life beneath him. The city was still wrapped in a pre-dawn haze, streetlights casting long, trembling reflections on wet asphalt. Even before the wheels began to roll, his mind had already begun replaying the text, "I miss you," over and over, each repetition a hammer striking his chest. He gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles blanching, feeling the car as an extension of his anxious heartbeat. Every honk, every distant siren, every early jogger on the sidewalk seemed amplified, a chorus of judgment and inevitability. He ran through scenarios, each one more catastrophic than the last, Victoria frowning over her phone, forwarding the text to HR with a single, cold tap, the administrative leave, Sophie's face falling when he came home empty-handed, jobless and defeated. The city seemed to conspire against him. Traffic lights lingered longer than normal, pedestrians moved slower, and every reflection in the car windows seemed to mimic his panic, 2 Lucas Grants, one rational, one completely undone. He thought about the people he worked alongside, the friendly faces in the facilities department, the technicians who joked with him about thermostats and leaking pipes. They had no idea the storm brewing inside him, no clue that the CEO whose office towered above them all was about to judge him, define him, perhaps even destroy him in a single moment. As he turned into the parking garage beneath Whitmore Tower, the cold, metallic smell of concrete and exhaust seeped into his lungs. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the rows of cars. He hesitated at the badge scanner, his thumb trembling as he pressed it against the reader. A soft beep. The gate lifted. One slow exhale, and he forced himself forward. Every step toward the elevator felt like walking through a gauntlet. Colleagues' conversations echoed faintly from distant cubicles, coffee cups clinking, keyboards tapping. Normalcy surrounded him, yet he felt suspended in a vacuum of dread, every ordinary sound sharp and threatening. He clutched the strap of his bag, as though holding onto it would tether him to reality. In the elevator, his reflection looked stranger than usual, pale, gaunt, and unervingly transparent. He rehearsed apologies, explanations, and confessions in his mind. It was meant for a friend. "I didn't mean it. I respect you. His internal monologue fractured as he imagined Victoria's voice, crisp and impossibly composed, cutting through him. "Lucas, are you aware of what you just sent me?" Reaching the 14th floor, he stepped into the familiar hum of the office, but the hum had shifted. It felt quieter somehow, like a room waiting for something terrible to happen. He noticed the absence of certain noises, the cheerful greeting at the coffee station, the casual laugh near the break room, small, subtle signs that magnified his unease. His desk, usually a place of refuge with its scuffed surfaces and half-finished maintenance requests, now seemed threatening, a spotlight for potential doom. At 10:30, Marcus from accounting wandered over, his expression too eager, a smirk lurking on his face. "You hear about the executive floor this morning?" Lucas froze mid-breath. "What about it?" Marcus leaned casually, the embodiment of mischievous curiosity. "Victoria didn't come in. First time in years she's missed a morning meeting. Rumor is she left some event last night and nobody's seen her." Lucas's blood ran ice cold. Was it because of me? He thought. Every fiber in his body screamed with guilt and fear. He forced a shrug, forcing words through teeth clenched tight. "Probably a personal day." Marcus snorted. "Victoria Hale doesn't take personal days. That woman practically lives in this building." The words landed like a punch. Lucas watched Marcus walk away, and the echo of his laughter bounced off the sterile walls. The threat was invisible but tangible, a storm approaching that he could not see but knew would crash into him. By noon, Lucas's mind was frayed, every small task requiring monumental effort. Emails blurred together, his hands hovered over keyboards, but his thoughts remained on a single terrifying possibility. Victoria had read his message, and now the consequences were inevitable. Then the phone buzzed, Sophie, calling from her after-school program. Her face, framed by small, gap-toothed innocence, filled the screen. "Hi, Daddy. I made a turkey with my hand today." Lucas tried to smile, stepping into the empty hallway for privacy. "That's amazing, sweetheart. I can't wait to see it." She tilted her head, her 6-year-old perception piercing. "Daddy, are you sad?" The question hit harder than any HR scenario, any fear of job loss. His chest constricted. Here was Sophie, pure and unaware of corporate terror, looking at him like she could see the weight pressing down on his life. He tried to deflect with a small laugh. "I'm just tired, baby girl. Long day at work." She nodded solemnly. "When you're sad, you should eat ice cream. That's what Grandma says." Lucas's laugh broke again, quieter this time, tinged with despair and love. "Grandma's right," he thought. Yet even as he pressed the phone to his chest, the darkness of the day lingered. There was no undoing the message, no erasing the misstep. Every hour that passed felt like a countdown to disaster. And somewhere, deep inside, he knew the storm wasn't just coming, it had already begun. Lucas's heart had barely slowed from Sophie's innocent video call when his desk phone rang, a sharp, insistent tone that sliced through the hum of the office. He glanced at the small digital display. An internal extension he didn't recognize blinked back at him. Hesitation rooted him to his chair. Something about the number felt official, too deliberate. Too precise. "Mr. Grant," a calm, measured voice began, unfamiliar yet authoritative. "This is Patricia. Miss Hale's executive assistant. She would like to see you in conference room A on the 32nd floor. Immediately, please." The line clicked dead before he could form a single word in reply. The silence that followed was heavier than the words themselves. 32nd floor. Executive level. The place where he had only ever stepped when an emergency demanded it or a malfunction required his immediate attention. The level where he knew he was normally invisible, a ghost among cubicles and high-powered executives. Lucas sat frozen, the receiver still pressed against his ear. The hum of computers, the faint tapping of keyboards, even the idle laughter at the far end of the office seemed like distant echoes in a cavern. His mind spun faster than his pulse. "Immediately," she said. What did she want? Did she already read my messages? Was this the moment where it all came crashing down? He forced himself upright, running a shaky hand through his hair. His badge trembled in his palm as he made his way to the elevator. The ride up felt interminable, each floor a tick of a clock counting down to catastrophe. He watched his reflection in the steel doors, a pale, anxious man with dark circles under his eyes, a single dad juggling too many roles, now caught in a storm he had no control over. When the elevator doors finally slid open onto the executive floor, the transformation was immediate and oppressive. The buzz of office life was gone, replaced with a thick silence that seemed to absorb sound. Thick carpet muffled his footsteps, abstract art and floor-to-ceiling glass panels loomed like sentinels. The scent of fresh flowers mixed with high-end coffee hung faintly in the air, a subtle reminder that he had wandered into a world far removed from the fluorescent-lit maintenance rooms he inhabited. Patricia appeared at the end of the hallway, her silver hair pulled tight into a severe bun, her expression carved from stone. Without a word, she gestured for him to follow. He obeyed, his stomach twisting as they passed Victoria's corner office. The glass walls revealed the pristine, empty desk and the panoramic city view beyond, a reminder of the power that resided here. Lucas felt smaller, every step a reminder that he was intruding into someone else's universe. Conference room A was at the far end, a space Lucas had never been allowed to enter under normal circumstances. Patricia opened the door without knocking, ushering him inside. The room was empty. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, gray clouds pressing low against the skyscrapers. A long mahogany table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than his entire monthly salary. He hovered near the door, uncertain whether to sit or flee, each instinct pulling him in opposite directions. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a small lifeline, and he pulled it out with trembling fingers. A notification blinked back at him, cruel in its timing, sent at 2:03 p.m., forward entire conversation. His stomach lurched. Somehow, in his fidgeting, he had forwarded his entire message history with Marcus, not just the misdirected, "I miss you," but every late-night vent, every private reflection, every vulnerable thought he had ever expressed about Victoria. All of it, the words screamed silently from the screen. Lucas's hand shook as he scrolled through the messages, each one a confession of what he had really seen, the lonely hours, the exhausted walks through empty corridors, the hidden fatigue of the woman who had built a billion-dollar empire but looked like she carried it all alone. He sank into one of the leather chairs, his legs no longer able to hold him upright. The door swung open with sudden force. Victoria Hale entered. Rain clung to her dark hair, her usual immaculate blazer dotted with droplets, giving her an almost fragile, human quality he had never seen before. Her eyes, green, piercing, impossible, found him immediately. The door closed softly behind her, the sound echoing like a final judgment. Lucas scrambled to his feet, words spilling from his mouth before he could filter them. "Miss Hale, I can explain. The messages were never meant for you. I hit the wrong button. It was a mistake. I completely understand if you need to terminate my employment. I never intended any disrespect. I never." She held up a hand, stopping the torrent before it could drown him. Her gaze searched his face, green eyes sharp yet unreadable, cutting through his panic with surgical precision. "Are you afraid of me, Lucas?" The question was a scalpel to his chest. "What?" "Right now, in this moment," she said, stepping closer, heels clicking softly against the floor, "are you afraid of me, or are you afraid of losing your job?" Lucas swallowed, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "Both," he admitted. A flicker crossed her face, not anger, not cold dismissal, but something almost like recognition. She turned toward the window, standing with her back to him, looking out at the rain-streaked city below. "I read what you wrote." "All of it," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. Lucas closed his eyes, waiting for the axe to fall. "And I have to admit, I wasn't sure how to respond." She finally turned, facing him fully. "No one has ever described me as lonely before, at least not to my face. Not even behind my back, as far as I know. And yet, you did." Lucas's chest tightened. She actually read them. She actually understood. The air between them was thick, alive with tension, curiosity, and the fragile, terrifying beginnings of something neither of them could have anticipated. Lucas stood rigid in the conference room, the weight of his own vulnerability pressing down on him. He had expected judgment, maybe a cold dismissal, or worse, the professional equivalent of exile, but Victoria's presence was something entirely different. It wasn't condemnation, it wasn't even curiosity in the ordinary sense. It was as if she were measuring him, assessing the depth of his honesty, the texture of his fear, the rawness of his confession. The city stretched out behind her through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a gray, endless expanse of steel and glass, but for Lucas, it was irrelevant. The towering skyline, the distant traffic, the humming machinery of Whitmore Tower, it all dissolved into the periphery. Everything that mattered was here, in the room, between them. Victoria finally spoke, her voice low, softer than he had ever heard. "Why did you notice me, Lucas?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Notice you? You said you see things," she replied, stepping closer, heels silent on the carpet. "Things people don't want anyone to see." "Why me?" He swallowed hard, searching for words that wouldn't sound presumptuous or inappropriate. "Because I see exhaustion, even when you try to hide it. Loneliness, even when you're surrounded by people. The way you move through this building like a ghost, always first in, last out. It stuck with me." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked to the window, tracing patterns on the glass with a fingertip. The city reflected in her eyes, fractured and distant, and Lucas realized he was seeing her in a way no one else did. Not the CEO, not the woman in magazines, not the untouchable, untiring figure of power. Just Victoria Hale, the human beneath the armor. "I've spent 12 years being this person," she said quietly, still gazing outward. "The one who doesn't falter, the one who doesn't need anyone, the one who can't afford mistakes because everything depends on me." Her shoulders slumped just slightly, a fleeting crack in her carefully maintained poise. No one notices. No one really sees. Lucas stepped forward instinctively. "You're not alone," he said, the words spilling out despite his attempts to keep calm. "Not anymore. Even if it's just me noticing, that counts. It's not nothing." Her head turned, eyes locking on his with a weight that made his chest ache. For a moment, he saw disbelief, wariness, and something fragile, hope, all mingled in her gaze. She took a tentative step closer, closing some of the physical distance between them, and yet the room still felt charged with unspoken rules, invisible walls erected over years of power, expectation, and survival. "Lucas," she began, her voice a whisper now. "You could be wrong. You could be misreading me. Maybe I'm not lonely. Maybe I just act tired so no one bothers me. Maybe noticing me doesn't mean anything at all." He shook his head, taking another step toward her. "It means everything. It's why you're still here. It's why you keep going. Because someone, maybe the wrong someone, maybe the unnoticed, actually sees you for more than what you do." For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Her gaze softened slightly, and he thought he glimpsed vulnerability, raw and human, the kind of openness that came only in rare, private moments. She finally lowered herself into one of the leather chairs across from the table, a slow, deliberate movement that suggested she was testing him as much as herself. Lucas followed, sitting opposite her, hands clasped tightly around his coffee cup, an anchor for nerves that threatened to betray him. They didn't speak for a long moment, just studied each other. He noticed the faint dark circles under her eyes, the subtle crease at the corner of her mouth, the tension in her shoulders that even power couldn't erase. She looked like someone who had given everything for a title, for a building, for the world, and in exchange, had lost a piece of herself. Finally, she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you care?" Lucas's chest tightened, memories of Sophie flashing unbidden, her laughter, her small hand in his, the way she trusted him to keep her safe. "Because I know what it's like to carry everything alone. I had my own version of that. I still do. But I also know, seeing someone, noticing them, sometimes that's enough to remind them they're human." Victoria's eyes glistened, though whether from tears or the city lights reflecting off her irises, he couldn't tell. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant, alive. It wasn't a pause between words, it was a bridge between two worlds, one of power and one of humanity, precariously balanced on trust and honesty. Lucas realized something then. This was no longer about professional boundaries, HR policies, or misdirected messages. This was about connection, real, terrifying, complicated connection. And despite the fear gnawing at his chest, he understood he had already crossed a threshold. The first genuine smile touched her lips, a fragile, almost shy upturn, unlike the controlled, polished expression she wore before the world. And in that smile, Lucas saw the possibility of something neither of them had dared to acknowledge, the chance to be seen, truly seen, by someone who mattered, and to find solace in shared vulnerability. Outside, rain pattered softly against the windows, the gray skyline stretching endlessly. Inside, the tension remained, taut and electric, but for the first time, it felt like potential instead of threat. And Lucas, holding his breath, realized he had never been more aware of both the danger and the promise of honesty. The following days blurred into a strange rhythm. Lucas arrived early, left late, and in every hallway, every department, he felt the invisible pull of attention, the weight of others noticing him in ways he had never experienced before. Every glance from a coworker, every whisper in a distant cubicle, felt magnified, loaded with judgment or speculation. He knew they had started talking. The misdirected text hadn't stayed private, and now, though no one said a word directly to him, the atmosphere of the building had changed. Victoria's presence hovered like a silent storm. She moved through the office with her usual precision, her tailored suits cutting lines through fluorescent-lit hallways, but Lucas noticed subtleties no one else would, the way her gaze lingered on him for half a beat longer than necessary, the brief exhale as if she were letting go of tension, the faint tremor in her hand when she adjusted her coffee cup. These were her cracks, and he saw them all. By Wednesday evening, he received the message, a brief, encrypted email from Victoria. Same time, 32nd floor. Private. Lucas's stomach churned. The word private carried a weight heavier than any performance review, any maintenance emergency, any HR directive. He left the office behind, ignoring the hum of fluorescent lights, the click of keyboards, the murmur of colleagues. This was no longer work. It was a crossing into a realm that balanced precariously between the professional and the forbidden, between observation and confession. The elevator ride up was longer than usual, or perhaps it only felt longer because of the anticipation thrumming in his chest. He stared at his reflection in the steel doors, adjusting his tie despite its irrelevance. The man staring back was both himself and someone entirely new, a caretaker, a single father, a man who knew the meaning of responsibility, but now venturing into territory he had no blueprint for. When the doors opened, Victoria was already there, standing with her back to the windows, rain still clinging faintly to the glass. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, casual in a way that blurred the lines between CEO and human. The sight caught him off guard, more intimate than any email, more disarming than any conference room discussion. "Lucas," she said, voice soft but measured, "I'm glad you came." He nodded, unable to speak immediately. Her office, usually a domain of immaculate control and distance, had been transformed. The harsh fluorescent glare replaced by soft lamplight, a pair of comfortable chairs positioned near the window, a small table holding 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and warmth, not corporate sterility. Lucas stepped inside cautiously, feeling the strange gravity of being invited into a private world he had no right to occupy. I didn't want to assume." "You won't," she interrupted gently, "and I didn't send it to assume anything. I sent it because I needed," she paused, her eyes searching his. "Someone to see me. Really see me." The word struck him like a thunderclap. Here was the titan of industry, the woman whose name alone commanded respect and fear, admitting to the same vulnerability he had confessed in his misdirected messages. She was as human as Sophie, as fragile in her need for connection, and yet as strong as the city skyline they overlooked. "You're not alone," Lucas whispered, stepping closer, the warmth from his cocoa cup grounding him. "Not really. And you don't have to be." Victoria's eyes glistened with something that teetered between relief and fear. "It's complicated," she said, voice cracking slightly, "because everything about this, about us, feels like it shouldn't exist. Power dynamics. Gossip. Perception. And yet, I can't stop thinking about it. About you." A shiver ran down Lucas's spine. He had rehearsed this moment in his head countless times, but nothing could have prepared him for the gravity of hearing her voice admit what he had only dared to hope. "I've felt the same," he said quietly. "Since the first night you let me see behind the armor. Since I realized that beneath the title, you're human. Just like me." She hesitated, glancing toward the city, then back to him. "And Sophie?" I know," he said, finishing her thought. "She's the center of my life. And if you're going to be part of this, you need to see that. I won't hide that from you. From anyone." Victoria's lips curved in the faintest smile, almost shy, almost defiant. "Then I guess we're crossing lines, aren't we?" "Lines?" Lucas asked, heart pounding. Yes, she whispered. Lines that no one can see, but everyone will eventually notice. We're not supposed to do this, Lucas. But we're here anyway. The tension in the room thickened, heavy and almost electric. Outside, the city continued its mechanical hum, oblivious to the intimacy, the confession, the crossing of invisible boundaries. And in that charged silence, Lucas realized that they had both stepped into uncharted territory, not just of desire or curiosity, but of honesty, trust, and the terrifying possibility of connection. Victoria's hand hovered over her mug, her fingers twitching as if testing the waters of her courage. Lucas met her gaze, heart hammering in unison with her hesitation. They were crossing, together, into a space where professional decorum collided with raw, unfiltered humanity, and neither could turn back now. Monday morning arrived with a clarity that made the city feel sharper, colder, as if the world had been holding its breath overnight and now exhaled in judgment. Lucas had spent the weekend trying to convince himself that the closeness with Victoria, those private evenings, the shared laughter, the tentative confessions, would remain theirs alone. But reality, cruel and unyielding, had a way of intruding. His badge failed to unlock the entrance to the office. The sudden beep of denial made his stomach drop into his shoes. Confused, he swiped again. Same result. Panic began to bubble. His heartbeat thundering, Lucas glanced at the security desk where a guard was speaking quietly into a radio. Mr. Grant, the guard said, voice tight, HR wants to see you. Now. They're waiting on the 15th floor. Lucas swallowed hard. 15th floor. HR. That's never good. Not ever. His mind raced through every misstep, every late-night interaction, every ill-timed coffee break with Victoria. He had been careful, or so he thought, but office politics had a way of gnawing through even the best-laid intentions. When he entered the HR conference room, the atmosphere was charged with an almost physical tension. 3 representatives sat behind a polished table, faces grim, hands folded, eyes sharp with the anticipation of confrontation. Their silence was deafening, a prelude to judgment. Mr. Grant, the HR director began, voice clipped and precise, we've received a formal complaint alleging inappropriate conduct towards senior executive Victoria Hale. You are being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The words hit like a hammer. Lucas's chest constricted, his mind flashed to every shared laugh, every confidential discussion, every time Victoria had invited him into her office. What? That's impossible. She invited me. She asked for these meetings. One of the representatives, a younger woman with tight shoulders and wary eyes, slid a folder across the table. Lucas hesitated, then opened it, the contents unraveling like a nightmare, emails, logs of their after-hours visits, and the infamous forwarded messages. The entire trail of intimacy, honesty, and connection laid bare on glossy paper, ready to be weaponized by someone anonymous and ruthless. His hands trembled. This is insane. I didn't do anything wrong. Check her calendar. Check her emails. She asked me to come. She knows everything. A tense silence fell. The HR director adjusted her glasses but remained silent, as if waiting for him to break. Then the door swung open with decisive force. Victoria entered, her presence filling the room in a way that made Lucas feel both protected and exposed. She was no longer the vulnerable woman from their private encounters. This was the CEO, the storm incarnate, poised, powerful, immovable. Her tailored black suit, her hair pulled back into a severe knot, radiated authority. She didn't glance at the HR team, her eyes locked on Lucas, a mixture of reassurance and resolve. I understand there's been a complaint, she said, voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Let me make this perfectly clear, there has been no harassment. At no point has Mr. Grant acted inappropriately. Every meeting, every conversation, has been at my invitation. The room stiffened. HR representatives exchanged uneasy glances, shuffling papers. Victoria didn't wait for agreement, she stepped closer to Lucas, her eyes scanning the room with the cold precision of someone who ruled empires. Furthermore, she continued, voice rising slightly, I consider Lucas Grant not only a valued employee but a trusted confidant. I will personally ensure this complaint is investigated, and that the person who submitted false accusations is held accountable. Lucas felt a rush of relief so intense it nearly knocked him off his feet. He met her gaze, gratitude and disbelief warring in his chest. She had stepped into the line of fire for him, choosing to protect him publicly just as she had let him into her private world. When the HR director finally cleared her throat, it was with palpable discomfort. We will review the matter further. But given your statement, Miss Hale, we will lift the administrative leave immediately. Victoria nodded sharply, turning her attention back to Lucas. For the first time that day, the warmth from their private encounters softened the armor she wore. Are you okay? She asked quietly, only for him. Lucas exhaled shakily, realizing the gravity of what had just passed. Yes. Thanks to you. I didn't see that coming. She studied him, a flicker of something human crossing her face, concern, relief, and perhaps the faintest shadow of her own vulnerability. I did. And I knew the moment people started noticing our after-hours meetings that someone would try to twist it into something ugly. I should have anticipated it. He shook his head. It's not your fault. Not one bit. And I don't regret a single conversation with you. Not one. Her eyes softened, and for the briefest instant, the room was theirs again, the corporate walls and surveillance forgotten. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out and squeezed his hand. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. In that simple gesture was acknowledgement, solidarity, and the quiet promise of something far greater than office politics could touch. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to the drama that had just played out inside the towering glass walls of Whitmore Tower. But inside, Lucas and Victoria shared a secret understanding. They had survived exposure, scrutiny, and the corrosive power of rumor, and they had done it together. For the first time, Lucas felt it, hope. Not naive hope, but the kind that comes from surviving the impossible and finding someone willing to stand beside you in the storm. And in that moment, he knew nothing would ever be the same. The snow arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly at first, dusting the city in delicate white flakes that drifted lazily down from a steel-gray sky. By the time Lucas stepped out of the office building, the city streets were transformed into a winter tableau, pristine and strangely serene. He gripped Sophie's hand, her little mittened fingers wrapped tightly around his, and felt the kind of warmth that no office, no title, no paycheck could ever provide. She looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes, a reminder of why he endured every long night, every harrowing workweek, every anxious moment of parental uncertainty. I want to see where Daddy works, Sophie announced, her voice bubbling with the kind of certainty only a 6-year-old could wield. Lucas smiled, nodding. The thought of showing her the labyrinthine hum of HVAC systems, the ventilation shafts, and the climate control units felt mundane, but in Sophie's eyes, it was magical. And magic was exactly what he needed tonight. They walked through the lobby together, the snow crunching beneath their boots, until Sophie froze mid-step, tugging at his coat. Daddy, look! Victoria was descending the main staircase, her casual elegance making her look younger, softer, somehow lighter than he had ever seen her. Gone was the armor of black suits and corporate authority, she wore a soft gray sweater, dark slacks, and her hair loose around her shoulders, catching snowflakes in the strands. Sophie's eyes sparkled with recognition. That's the lady from your picture, Daddy, she asked. Lucas's face warmed. Yes, sweetheart, he replied, a little embarrassed that Sophie had remembered the framed image of Victoria on his desk, the one he had saved from a corporate magazine article months ago. Without hesitation, Sophie bounded toward her. Excuse me, lady, she called, stopping just in front of Victoria. You're the one Daddy says is really strong, but sometimes looks sad. Victoria froze for a heartbeat, then bent down to Sophie's level, her green eyes meeting the child's gaze. "He said that?" she asked softly. "He did." Sophie nodded vigorously. "And he says you're the most important person at his work, and that you work really, really hard." Lucas felt his stomach tighten as he watched Victoria's composure crack, just slightly, the edges of her professional armor softening in a way that made her seem completely human. Her smile was gentle, almost fragile. "Your daddy sounds like a very kind man," she said. Sophie's lips curled in a sly grin. "He's okay," she said, matter-of-factly. "He makes good pancakes." Lucas chuckled, closing the distance and putting a reassuring hand on Sophie's shoulder. "Sweetie, we should let Miss Victoria get to her car. She's very busy." Victoria straightened but didn't move immediately, her eyes lingering on Sophie with an intensity that made Lucas's heart flutter. "Actually, today, I'm not busy at all," she said quietly, and for a moment, the world felt suspended in a strange, perfect equilibrium. The three of them stood together in the lobby, the first snow settling around them, snowflakes dusting hair and shoulders. The tension of weeks, the misdirected text, the private meetings, the anonymous complaint, the threat of professional ruin, dissolved into the quiet intimacy of shared presence. Lucas, with Sophie by his side, and Victoria, standing just close enough to feel warmth without breaching propriety, realized that the unspoken had become tangible. They belonged, at least in this moment, to each other in ways that nothing could undo. Sophie tugged their hands, spinning them in an impromptu circle, laughing as snowflakes caught in her hair. Lucas followed her lead, spinning with abandon, letting himself be pulled into the small, magical world she created. Out of the corner of his eye, he met Victoria's gaze. Her smile was luminous, genuine, unguarded. "Your daddy makes people comfortable," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough for Lucas to hear. Lucas felt the weight of everything, the fear, the suspense, the long weeks of uncertainty, lift ever so slightly. Sophie's laughter mingled with the quiet crunch of snow beneath their feet, and in that moment, Lucas realized that life could be more than survival, more than work, more than anxiety and fear. It could be warmth, connection, and hope. Victoria's hand brushed his arm, tentative but deliberate, and Lucas knew that what had begun with a misdirected text, with anxiety and missteps and silent observation, had become something that neither of them could have predicted but both were willing to nurture. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the city, the office towers, and the streets in white. Somewhere inside Whitmore Tower, phones rang, meetings continued, and the machinery of commerce hummed along. But out here, in this quiet, luminous space between falling snowflakes, three lonely hearts had found each other. Lucas's heart swelled as he watched Sophie teach Victoria how to catch snowflakes on her tongue. Victoria laughed, a sound so genuine it made the winter air seem warmer. Lucas squeezed her hand gently, feeling the quiet, powerful promise that had emerged from weeks of fear, uncertainty, and vulnerability. And in that moment, Lucas understood, hope wasn't something fragile. It wasn't fleeting. It was here, tangible, as real as Sophie's laughter, as vivid as Victoria's smile, as profound as the snow blanketing the city in a quiet, eternal possibility. For the first time in years, Lucas Grant felt it fully, alive, seen, and not alone.